organizations or other municipalities on how they fund grant programs. Jesse, you want to say anything that you found amongst your research?
Just that we are doing a great job. A lot of these are sometimes one-time things or less than we do. At some point it sort of just became, let's find cities that do grant programs, whether or not we consider them a peer city. So, Atlanta has a very strong grant program, but they're not necessarily a peer city. But overall, it was a lot of programmatic funding rather than operational. That was, always very interesting. But beyond that, requirements for the application were about the same in terms of eligibility and the applications themselves. Audits didn't come up very often, but not necessarily the same thing, programmatic versus operational. I think that the main thing that I took away from it was that we might have something really special here in the city.
Thank you, Jesse. Real quick, going through some of your other reading material, there's a list of additional organizations. These are known nonprofits in the community that could potentially be eligible for our funding program. Either they may not know about it or don't have the statute to apply, or we haven't made a touch point yet. But these are, in doing our 990 research and kind of knowing what's out there, some of them are non-traditional applicants or might not be considered a normal applicant, like the Air Capital Corvette Club. It could be considered a cultural organization, so we included anything that we thought might be an eligible applicant. So just so you know who's not currently being funded by our program, but might be able to. And then the other document that's kind of meaty is this spreadsheet that we pulled the last 10 years of funding. We did this in part for the cultural plan, our strategic plan that's going up for adoption on May 14th. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But as part of our research and understanding for an addendum that we're putting out into that plan on cultural funding is just to provide some historical data that we were really surprised when we look through, like, some of the organizations that we just assumed had been funded forever really aren't, or the opposite. Oh, we've been funding that organization for a long time. I do want to draw your attention to kind of those final columns, those last three columns, specifically in the funding program. So, well, maybe let me rewind for some orientation. Those top organizations that start with Arts Council and end at the Wichita Sedgwick County Historical Museum, that's what that acronym is. Those are what we would consider cultural institutional funding. So those are organizations that don't compete for funding. It doesn't include Century 2 or Botanica because they're not funded out of the same funding pool, but they by all means receive city funding. So looking at the list below, these are the organizations that have applied and received competitive grant funding. When we go over to that average funding award, that's just really the total divided by 10 years, what their average funding level is. We've heard from a handful of organizations that say, back in the day, we used to get $100,000. Well, if we go back to 2015, like, no, you didn't. So maybe 20 years ago you did, but really pulling from a 10-year average was an interesting process. We also looked at inflation metrics. So using the Department of Labor and Statistics, Bureau of Labor and Statistics, which I'm no expert in. I'm looking in the room for some that might be experts, whether that's a good number to look at, but just pulling from the buying power from 2015 to 2024, where we would land. One thing that we thought was really interesting is that bottom number, 519, versus the 472 that we gave out last year. Had we been keeping pace with our growth over the last 10 years, we're not too far behind when we think about advocating for more money. Where we would love to be is that $648,000 if we are keeping up with inflation and giving out consistent average funding awards. That's where we could be. Of course, they're competitive, fresh applications every year. We never show you this data during the funding rounds because it's a fresh application each year. We're not comparing what the organization received or didn't receive in the past, but it is interesting to look at it as a whole for the funding program itself. A couple other quick notes is that those highlighted in blue are those that received the Developing Arts grant. So as we look forward to 2025, we really haven't given that grant out very many times over the past 10 years. So really judging its success, we have the raw data here telling us the impact that it's had in the community. We have given some, so it's not to say it's been a complete failure, but has it reached its potential? Especially when we look at 2020 to now, we've only given it out twice. What is that value added? And then we put asterisks by the organizations that no longer exist. And we did remove those. Did I include them in the inflation metrics? Like I pulled those out to see like what would be our maximum ask that we could make a good case for if we were to advocate for funding. And that's where that 648 came from. So that's some light reading material for you that we can dive into further.
I do want to add one quick caveat. I believe Lindsay said these are the groups that have applied for and received funding. I believe there's 1 to 2 additional groups that have applied for funding in the past 10 years that did not receive funding that are not on this list.
That's a good point.
Just FYI.
So that's a great point. And then one more thing, the Artist Access Grant is listed as the very bottom line in terms of what we gave out. We don't have like the individuals range, but you could do the total we gave out in those funding, which shout out to 2024 for just obviously it was an amazing year for that program. So we hope all this information helps inform what we're looking forward to for 2025 funding allocations. And with that, Dominic, you have quorum, so you can.
We will go ahead and get started and follow the agenda. Hopefully you had a chance to look over and review the minutes from the previous meeting. If we can get a motion. All in favor? All right. Good to go. All right. So we are hopefully going to have approval of the cultural plan on next Tuesday, 2 Tuesdays from now.
2 Tuesdays.
Yeah. You still available?
I do.
Okay, good.
So May 14th, we're presenting the plan. I think it's helpful to have a visual aid. It's this big hunkin' thing. It's now like in the 80-page range. There's no major changes anticipated, especially as it relates to this funding program. We hope that the one goal that we have in there directly related to this is it just says we're going to assess the funding program for its effectiveness or something along those lines. So it doesn't actually make any sweeping changes in this plan, but it enables this body to make suggested changes. In the presentation that I have drafted, I did pull out the cultural funding program and plan to say like any changes to the program will be done incrementally and in communication with the community. We don't anticipate any sweeping changes, but we do want to address the known limitations of it. So I'm hoping that addresses it, but also gives this body freedom to make changes in the future. What this plan does, if and when it's passed, is it makes the 2008 plan and the 2013 addendum, which governs this body, it makes that obsolete. So it wipes the slate clean. Not that we want to throw our best practices out the window, but it really gives us a lot of leveraging leeway to make changes and be reactive in the future to the community as it's.
Okay, you heard any feedback? Because in that last meeting, the council, they were taking it to their advisory board, and I know the Arts Council were doing their sub meetings.
Yeah, we've only heard positive feedback. So the Arts Council had 2 listening sessions. Specifically, they invited perhaps applicants. We don't know who they invited directly. We were not involved.
We don't have a list.
But there were 5 organizations that were represented, some who have received funding and at least one who hasn't received funding. And they just wanted clarification just to know that like we're still funding things, and that I think has been clarified. We've added an additional appendix to the plan to really just showcase this, like what is our history and what are our known challenges. So I compiled the challenges that we've talked about in previous meetings this year of the audit, other publicly funded organizations. We've just named those challenges in an appendix. We haven't said we're addressing them, but we just said that like these are things we know about that make the cultural funding program tricky and make the decisions very tricky. So that's the only thing that's come out of the listening sessions. We did have a public survey out on the city's website called Forum. I met with the Greater Wichita Partnership and had a subcommittee work session, but we've heard very positive feedback. There's a lot of evergreenness in the plan, which is nice because you can't not like it in that same, which we were very strategic about. But we have no reason to believe it won't be adopted in full with a unanimous vote. That's what was. But we'll see. But Tuesday, May 14th, you're all invited, and we'll send out information once it's confirmed. The agenda's not out yet, so it could get pulled, it could get pushed, but we anticipate it to go through and be passed with unanimous vote. That's the plan.
Before you then go, that segue into the actual grant program that we are doing here. Jesse, any questions about that? Take it away.
So I just want to step back for 1 second, and I don't know if Dominic, mentally you're on number 2 or number 3 of the agenda. 2, great. So the big point is that in 2025, we are going to have an additional $75,000 to award in programmatic funding. We received a grant from the NEA to subgrant to organizations here in town.
This is breaking news.
Yeah.
Have we received that?
We're not aware of having received it in the past.
Yeah, the NEA has a subgranting fund for local arts agencies, municipalities, that they do a matched grant fund up to $150,000. We applied for it last summer for 2025, and we've received $75,000 for next year. It's not public information yet because we're still doing all the contracting with feds, but it's $75,000 for projects, which we've never had a project grant fund.
Yeah.
We can apply for it every other year, so we want to get used to it, but not too used to it. So that's a caveat.
Yeah. And hopefully the next time we apply for it, we can get even more funding, if not the full amount, because we have to match the funding that they give us, but we already do leaps and bounds above it. So hopefully the next time we bring this up, it'll be $150,000 that we can give out. We don't know yet what it looks like. Like, what does the application process look like? How do we divide it up? Lindsay and I have been tossing things back and forth, but that's all it's been. It's just us going, oh, we could do 5 $15,000 grants or 15 $5,000 grants, or, only
75,000.
right. Really do something crazy. The best party ever. But I don't know if we were hoping to kick around ideas, or if just to give it to you guys to ruminate on and to think about how you would like to see it apply, spread out among the community. Obviously, I think this would be another application process. There's some discussion of, is it you can apply for operational funding or project funding? Can you apply for both? Is this only open to people who can't apply for operational funding? There's all kinds of questions that we can answer. And so we're capable of designing it ourselves. We don't necessarily want to do that, at least without y'all's
I
feedback.
think we'd like some guidance on what direction you want us to go.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, this body will be the ones reviewing the applications and making the recommendations. So maybe just the two sides of the spectrum are, do we give a little bit to a lot of organizations or a lot of projects? Or do we try to really go big and give a few projects a lot of money, or one project a good chunk of money? Those are kind of the two spectrums of how the money can go out. And then maybe as it relates to our existing grant program, do we want to make this funding available for organizations that score really high in the program to double down because we know we struggle with incentives? Or do we want to use this funding for those who are not eligible. So that could be this additional organizations list, or it could be the handful of organizations that are not 501c3s who would never be able to apply. Roxy's, there's a handful that we would just never be able to fund, but by all means do great programs. So those are kind of the far and wide conversations to think about. We don't have to decide now, but it'd be great to just have some feelings from the committee.
I mean, the one thing I hear from our current grant applicants is we ask them to do a lot of work for no guarantee or a small amount of money. Personally, I'd rather do fewer, larger projects with this and make an impact myself, but that's just my opinion after hearing our current organization, mostly like those mid-sized ones, or, you know, we go with all the work in. I don't necessarily know how much work they consider after reading some of the applications sometimes, but that is their perception.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like the idea too. Some past members of this committee that have been really much arguing for supporting those that do the great quality of work, creating some sort of being a reward that one of those project pieces. I still love the fact that we actually have operational grants, which is nonprofits and involved with things. Those are truly uniform. You just ask for money to keep your lights on and not have to create a new program, which sometimes you may stretch to keep your funding.
Did I hear you like a bonus option? Like if you score really well,
I don't know if I like
you'd
the
be
bonus option necessarily,
eligible for it?
because if you look at people that score really well, those, I mean, ideally, I think those mid-tier ones are the ones which probably could use that money. If we were looking at our current structure the most, I love like exploration plays, and we know they're going to score very high generally if they stay in our current, you know, category. But we'll say, you know, music theater, Wichita, you're going to score really high.
Yeah.
So how do we find ways to grow and encourage new and exciting projects in our community?
So you might be thinking about like your Ballet Wichita's, your, you know, your.
I mean, even at this,
Arts partners,
Our partners.
whoever was in the medium category last year.
Which is a very small category.
Right.
It's shrinking.
I think, you know, even our actually ones that are jumping into that
Right.
tier.
Or tiptoeing back and forth.
Jesse, when you said the dollars have to be matched,
By us.
is that for the particular projects, or is that just in overall dollars for the art?
It's
Like if we were to do whatever it was, $15,000, is that mean where they actually get 30?
no.
Okay.
It means that we have to give out $75,000
In a grant
In
program.
a grant program.
Which we-
we don't have to
Yeah.
match what we're getting from
Yeah.
AA. Okay.
Yeah. Which made us like a super easy applicant,
Right.
because I'm like,
Right.
we do it all
Yeah.
anyway. Give
Right.
us more money.
As I was going through this process and applying for this grant and chatting with the NEA, I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, I want to match what we're already doing to your program. They're like, yeah, that's fine. No, it can't be this easy. It's not. Come on, make me make an argument.
Is there anything as far as like the programming? Is it one that we could looking at the, like, it's not been on this committee, we know there's gaps out there. With our current plan, we really can't address them.
Mhm.
Is there ways for us to then, whether it be an annual, whatever that time period, we look at the challenges or gaps we have in our community as far as our cultural arts program, and say, this is what we're going to push out there? Is that an option? I mean, it's probably something we need that we want within reason.
Trying to think of how to respond. I mean, the committee could latch onto one or two goals or strategies that are identified in the plan and try to design a program around it. We have one that's livable wages or mid-career artists. So if we had a program that said, we want this funding to go towards mid-career artists, pitches a project that supports a mid-career artist. It could be as simple as that.
Yeah, I like that. If
Art.
we can see things in the plan and focus on that, I would prefer that.
Art in Southeast Wichita.
Yeah, where we know that there's a desert, we can say there's this zip code that's completely underserved, pitch us a project that's going to happen in this zip code, or that gets that zip code to your project. I think the only limitation of the fund is that it can't be used for capital expenditures or anything that modifies a historic building. That's part of like the federal regulation. So we can do a mural on Museum of World Treasures, for example. But otherwise, it could be a public art project. It could be anything. It could be a festival. It could be something.
I think that's a great suggestion to have it centered around a goal that's in the small parameters rather than I think this organization deserves.
One thing off the top of my head is risk, something riskier. And when I say risk, like the creation of new development of new artwork or something site specific for our community. That would otherwise be trickier to fund because this program historically funds success or however we define that. So success is risk averse typically in terms of like, we want to do this new program, but it's not going to bring boatloads of people, but it's really important that we invest in innovative ideas.
And that's where I was going with it about finding that target. I think that, because the good thing about what we do is the operational aspect of it is that it's funding, it's a success.
Mm-hmm.
And every year there's something down in your heart you want to give money to, but with our setup, we really should.
Yeah.
I'm happy to send out just an email form, the list of goals and objectives and strategies from the plan. So if you guys, if that would help you better say like, okay, I want to target that one. I can do that.
Also, dumb that list down a little bit of things that could be eligible for this, because a lot of it's like internal infrastructure that like we're not going to be able to like build a new performing arts center with this fund. So we can narrow it down to things that goals or objectives that we think this fund might be able to have something.
I like the idea also of having something that's not organization specific and then it's project based. I think it could also be interesting if we had, I don't know, if we did like three that were 25,000 a piece, and if we had one that was just not as suggesting something, but letting the community make suggestions. Like if you had a $25,000 grant, what would you do? What would you do? Just to get some, I don't know, kind of ground roots thinking on what does the community think we could do with that.
Say a realistic amount of money. RSC had nothing to start out with to grade say we have something out, we needed something, we'll say we want a performance or a program in Southeast Wichita. What would be a good sum of money? No idea. Okay.
So it can totally depend, but I like the idea of 3 $25,000 grants, 2 which are targeted, and a third that's like, pitch us something. Shark Tank it, but tell us what you can do with $25,000.
This may not be the right forum to ask this question, but I don't know the answer. And the statues that were downtown that they were going to have to get moved because we didn't own them. We didn't actually buy them. They were on loan or something.
Yes, Sculpture Walkabout program was a rotating art program that the Arts Council was operating. That we didn't actually rotate the artwork, it just kind of was static. Right. They were always listed for sale, thinking businesses might buy them for their businesses. Never really took off in that setting. They weren't purchased, but they had a loan agreement with the Arts Council, which is an independent nonprofit. It's not a city entity. The Arts Council sunset that program when their funding dried up to support that annual renewal. So those sculptures, some of them are still on display at the grace of the artists, but we are looking at a replacement program where the city would potentially purchase artwork to fill those sites.
Okay.
We're looking at options for that.
Because that's, to me, that was a big loss. Like, I think they were really, that was a really nice feature downtown. And I was really surprised when I heard that how that whole thing just kind of was going to go away. So
we are looking at
other things.
We're looking at solving that through the capital improvement percent.
It just popped into my head as one of the gaps that we have in our art situation right now downtown.
No, that's spot on.
So I like the Shark Tank idea, especially as a way to use it as a marketing opportunity in terms of we have and get more people involved. Other than say the Arts Council, which is a fine option, do we have partners which we could say, hey, we want to do this. Can you handle this event for us? As far as like, say we want to truly do a pitch, say we get the applications, we're down to 3 applicants, and we create some sort of presentation where they come up there, they talk about it, we open it to the public, and then we address some sort of metric from there. I don't know.
I mean, that's, this body would,
Yeah, no, we would decide whether to make it be at public, those last 3, to say, hey, let's do it as a somewhat of a marketing process.
not something that we would facilitate and coordinate.
Yeah, I mean, if we bring other partners in, one of the things that we've done really well, that we even asked our applicants to tell us about the partnerships you've had. And if our goal is to expand the arts community and grow it, you know, get them involved, let them have a stake out there. We'll be applying for these programs as well.
Or we could do a category and say like, we're gonna do 25,000 for performing arts and have all the performing arts organizations put their ideas forward, and do one for visual arts. Narrow down the types of projects to different categories.
So are you thinking about having like an actual event where it's a Shark Tank?
I think we'll release that open one to the community one, so that we narrow it down with the scoring, and then we bring those last 3 up there. And we have additional questions that we have in front of people.
They'd have like a proof of concept.
Yeah.
Just like, this is the pitch. And
I could see it happening at a library or at the Advanced Learning Library.
United Way did something like
They
that.
they did ones recently with like another nonprofit group, and didn't the great, no, the chamber did one years ago too. They'd have people like pre-COVID where they bring people in and do their pitch. I mean, those are nice little events. You get people out there. I think we had a very large space. We had a very good turnout for your introduction to the plan, which is such a large room for our group.
We weren't supposed to be in that room. We got upgraded.
Because the hallway was like, oh my God, we're packed. You go out in the hall, like, where is it? Like,
It's all just perception. One thing to note about this fund is that also, correct me if I'm wrong, could go to individuals.
As far as I can tell, yeah, it would go to individuals.
So it doesn't have to be a 501c3 nonprofit. This group could set that standard, but it could be an artist collab or
But the
cohort.
project needs to benefit the community.
Yes, it needs to be public facing that the residents and visitors to Wichita can benefit from.
yeah, I'm okay with keeping it, no 501c3, individual artists, artist collaboratives, or collectives, whatever.
And
But
this,
then how do we score an individual against an organization?
For the project.
Yeah, but I guess too, if we have them present, then how do we avoid the quality of the art, which is something that we historically avoided?
This project we could. This is actually a project. This one we're actually looking at.
this you could look at the merit, the artistic merit of the piece.
Yeah, how many people, I mean, the scorecard could include like how many people will be impacted and
If you,
how long will the project last? I mean, I think depending on what it could be a season versus something that is a permanent installation, right?
so this kind of comes back to that Pier
Longevity
Cities.
of the
Yeah.
project or something.
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be something permanent.
But it could be.
It could be, yes.
Could be. Yeah. Like Tulsa's Vision Arts program, you know, it covers organizational capacity, artistic merit of the project, economic impact, and what they call maximizing value. So, I mean, there are models out there that we could look to. And those do include things that are potentially slightly more objective.
And the other thought would be, maybe we don't necessarily have to decide what the dollars. Maybe we could say up to a certain amount, but what if we had people come and present and we ended up with 3 really good ideas, and one of them is a $40,000 and one is 20 and one is 15. Like, do we want to
Have some flexibility.
have flexibility in the funding depending on what the ideas are? Keep that flexibility versus capping.
I think that there's also a benefit of marketing it and saying, 25, 25, and 25, because it shows that.
Especially if you're trying to build a project from scratch with this application process, you know what you're going to get. Because the downside of what our current funding model we have is they apply and they don't know. And granted, this should not be going to programming for our what we're currently doing. It shouldn't be. They said the bills pay. They're trying to set their budget, so they really can't figure out what our. If you're creating a project, you have $25,000. I can build my project around that. I mean, what I see this is as new, fresh, a way to act as a creative catalyst in our community. So we find those gaps and look for new, original, like Lindsay said, risky things that we have not been able to do. Granted, things are very expensive now, but $25,000 could make a big dent or do something, whether it's a multiple show standpoint or creating some sort of installation. I like it.
I really like that actually, and I didn't perspective, and if the community sees $1,000 grant that could inspire some. What we've historically given out is not $25,000 for these, like most of the small. level
Most of them
organizations.
receive less than that.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Significantly
all of a sudden, there's a big grant that we can offer. I think that would be.
How does the group feel about opening it up to anybody versus maybe excluding someone that receives an operating grant? Or
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts on that is, I unless we have to, I don't think we exclude it. As a matter of fact, I think we open it up to individual artists, 501c3s, and I also think that there might be a benefit. Let's just say that an organization that's specifically excluded, let's just say the town, that if they had an idea of something that would be like, maybe it's like an add-on to the carousel or something, and I think if it's allowed, I'd like to be able to consider that.
I'm the same way. I think even from that marketing aspect, growing the arts, putting some of these institutions in front of people in a new way is nice. So hopefully they can grow what they're doing and get additional revenue sources beyond what we provide, what we're getting now.
Important is encouraging individuals or collaborating artists who are competing against an organization like Botanic Arrow that they do so hard.
I can see the exploration place saying, hey, with $25,000, we can. So we're tough comparison.
I would argue that looking at some of the individual artists we have here, their flexibility and willingness to go into some of our underserved communities and probably having a greater connection to them, in my biased thought would be I would probably score that. Because as you move further from your neighborhood, I grew up on the north end, as I moved out, thankfully I still have some connection there. People tend to forget about what they once had. And if you have people that are trying to argue for that, I would hope that as they're putting their grant application together, be able to show that touch base with that community. The good news is we have a lot more flexibility. We can actually look at the quality of the program, the quality of the work, as opposed to me looking at our current structure and being very much black and white, saying, this is what we're judging on dominance, stay within this parameter, don't break away. It sounds like we can create this to be anything. And I think this is a way for us to really impact, not just, like we talked about the sculpture walk around, that's hitting most of it from downtown. There's certain neighborhoods where there's not a whole lot of. My first interactions with the arts was luckily having Evergreen doing the city-funded arts programs over the summer. I mean, I did painting, I started on watercolor, I did ceramics, which is a lot harder than you think it is when you're like 8 years old. having access in certain communities, but I know right now they don't have that. And even thankfully with the Evergreen Library, they're trying to create functions down there, but there's still a gap that I see from my professional job, just doing the stories on it that aren't being served. But because us just don't always go into those areas, and so we don't see it. So I hope they write that in their application.
I think that part of this is, if we, however we decide to do it, we have to build that, I call it a rubric, like a scoring sheet. And, one of them should be like funding need, where if it's just an emerging artist, there'd be a greater need for funding. Also, like, an element that assesses what this art will do to that area, like, I don't know what you would call it, but having a scoring sheet, it's not, and a good rubric doesn't constrain you. It just helps you kind of identify what the things that are important.
Sort of talking about like a local community impact or something.
Yeah, something like that, or for that, because you had mentioned be a desert, and I'm sure we want that to be, have something involved.
Okay, I think this is really healthy conversation. Thank you. We are probably going to take this feedback and listen to the recording of this meeting 12 times. And I say we, Jesse's likely going to, but we'll prepare some maybe examples of what we think we heard today. And obviously there's several committee members not in the room. We're not in a rush for this program. I think what we really wanted to know is who's going to be eligible, because if applicants would choose between which grant they would be applying for, we want to make sure that that choice is on the front end. Because realistically, some of our traditional arts organizations that do apply and receive funding might get more money in this other category. But if I'm hearing everyone correctly, we'd like to have it as open of application as possible, so we can wait on that. It doesn't necessarily have to go live in the timeline that we are hoping to anticipate on the regular program.
Group would reside in Sedgwick County and service Sedgwick County.
City of Wichita.
City of Wichita, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just
They have to be in Sedgwick County or at City of Wichita, or they just have to, the art would have to benefit the City of Wichita?
The latter is our typical understanding.
So like when there's an on-site,
I always use chamber music at the barn was always the great example. Like, it didn't take place in City of Wichita limits, but we know City of Wichita residents were benefiting from that, going to that program. So that's why they received funding.
But
however, this committee could change that.
Can always be a question on the rubric. Is do they live in the limits of the City of Wichita? 5 points.
Yeah.
Or within 15 miles.
Or within 15, yeah.
What we wouldn't be able to do is fund like Derby Public Library doing a program that we wouldn't be able to. Not that it wouldn't be a great program, but okay.
Something I wonder that if may be helpful to applicants is the feedback that we talked about, what we want to see on applications, if that can either be added to the application itself, or we can add sites and committee testimonials, like, don't be so afraid of the structure of this application.
Yeah, we can absolutely have thorough guidelines.
And then we also like to have like not Q&A sessions, well, sort of, that are reversed to where prospective applicants can hear from this body of what we're looking for. Here's what we always see as successful, or here's questions that were left lingering when you do your application. So we do that in the front end.
This new program would absolutely have a few info sessions ahead of time.
Info sessions.
Wow.
Yeah. So you have a printout of the application for 2025 for operational grants that I sent you. I know it's a lot of reading. Hopefully you were able to skim through it. It's pretty much all of the changes that we talked about. I did not try to sneak anything in there on you. If you see blue with the underlines, that is meant to mimic a link. There will be plenty of links. I've written a short companion document, you could call it, to the application, where if you have questions, click this link. It opens a companion document. You can read hey, this is what, this narrative question means, if you have questions. Some important points in here, the timeline that's on the second page. We're looking at hopefully opening this up on Friday, June 7th. That would be the day after potential June meeting of this body. So we would have the opportunity to make any last minute changes if necessary. The application period, I believe we shortened by a month. So they have roughly 3 months. We shortened it by a couple weeks, maybe not a whole month, but a couple weeks. So they have roughly 3 months to apply. That's a mistake. I'll fix that. So it is 2 months. So it's not June 7th through Friday, August 30th on that second dot. I will fix that. It is through Friday, whatever the last Friday in July is. Or I guess that'd probably be August 1st. Anyway. I know. Let me try it again. Reset. The applications will be open from June 7th through August 5th. So they have two months to apply. Then you all get roughly still the same 6 weeks to review before the Q&A sessions, which at this time would take place on September 19th. Deliberations, as always, would be the week later on the 26th. And then that finalization would be what would normally be our October meeting on October 3rd.
And this is just for the operating grants. We're anticipating that you want to move the artist access grant to Q4 again. So we try to pull this up to the latest we thought we could go. We could go later in the year if we want to, but then you're going to be reviewing a lot of stuff at the same time.
I
So
mean, 2 months seems like a lot of time to fill out an application.
It is.
I feel like-
Yeah. Historically, they have had 3 months.
Really?
They haven't
I just think
used
you
it.
forget, or I
yeah,
don't know.
I mean, they always come in at the last minute, but you like to give them some time to gather their materials.
This is a stair step.
Okay.
You ask you questions in that 3-month period traditionally. They will reach out.
Some of them, yeah.
And we'll have at least one info session for each grant, but maybe knowing that this year is going to be a little bit different, we might offer multiple info sessions.
Yeah.
Just depending on where the desire is.
You're
And
still planning on putting that $10,000 for the artist access, or that for our discussion.
That's up for your discussion. We obviously don't know what the funding is going to be for 25 yet. We don't typically know until July, August.
We have an idea in the middle of the year of what budget expects that percentage increase to be.
But we usually do a flat. This year we gave out 472,000. We would anticipate giving out that plus 2%-ish.
So we'd finalize recommendations on October 3rd. And then on November 8th-ish is when we would open the artist access grants.
One other just note in the timeline of what we put together is organizations budget this funding into their budgets for 25. So we like to get them the information sooner than later so that they at least know what they're getting or have access to Jan 1. So this is, I think, the latest we want to push it, but we're at the mercy of city council on finalizing numbers.
Yes. I know it's kind of moved up since COVID. We finalize on the 3rd, it would go to council by the end of October?
That's where we are trying to get it in before
We
then.
would be a little sneaky. We would try to get it in on October 15th. I believe is the date. Thursday, 4th, 5th, 6th.
Yeah, that's the Tuesday, 2 weeks from there.
Yeah.
Right.
We would
And-
probably submit the documentation before you guys finalized it, but there's always edits that happen. So
Because we should have a pretty good idea on the 26th. We just might not have the narratives completed until the 3rd. If I can pull back a little bit, going back to page 1, just to make sure that everyone's aware, this would effectively dissolve the Developing Arts grant. And we did change it from 5 years to 2 years. So that fourth bullet point on eligibility, an organization has a minimum of 2 years of operating history serving the residents of Wichita. I just want to make sure that that is seen and that you all are okay with that, or if you advise us to go back to 5 or 3, what do you all want to do? But that is a significant change.
Because that would, Mama Phil would be able to get into it.
There are
As an example.
Yes.
there are a couple that would who are coming up on their developing arts, but aren't able to do developing arts because of the thing. Yeah, it's anyway. It would grab groups like Mama Film,
You grab Mama Film, Mulberry, Crown Arts Collaborative.
Juniper,
Yeah.
Music on Site.
Mhm.
Although I think Music on Site's anyway.
Going through any other changes to highlight.
We did change the language on the 990 section
Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, you bet.
to attempt to make it so that everyone is in compliance. And we did, I am trying that, and I'm sorry, these pages aren't numbered. But the final page, the front side of the final page of your little packet, toward the top, we require additional financial information. If they submit a complete Form 990, we will not ask them to upload their profit and loss and balance sheet. If you say I'm doing the full 990, those won't pop up. Absolutely.
The funding limitations on page 2, the first bullet, we specify operational spending, operational expenses. But then the last bullet talks about actual expenses. And the way that I see is actual expenses could include operational spending and, spending as far as things that are non-operational. Is it your intent to have them update the actual, the complete total expenses? That's going to be the 250 to 499 to determine what size of organization they are, or do you want just their operational expenses?
We want all of them.
Okay.
Yeah, not just operational.
So,
So yes, so we only fund I mean, if breaking it, I suppose, maybe too far down, if it's operational and programmatic spending that an organization does, we only give them money for the operational spending, but as far as their expenses go, we want to know the total of both of those groups.
So in the second bullet, you said the maximum amount of funding is based upon the organizational, your expenses, and there's exclusions like in kind, donated items, volunteer hours, free rent.
Mhm.
So you're just talking about actual money that you send out and not the things that are, donated and whatnot.
Not the value of what you did, but
Okay.
and I get, go ahead.
If you'd like us to word that differently, we're happy to do that.
No, I don't know. In the best way possible.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I think it's okay.
Okay.
We've helped some organizations with this in the past, but it's usually just because they're trying to claim volunteer hours as expenses.
Specifically as like salary equivalent, and then it just explodes their budget.
Right.
I think they wouldn't want to, because that would limit the amount they, potentially limit the amount they could apply for.
Yes,
If
yes
it's
and no.
in the opposite
Yeah,
way.
Yeah.
the options apply for more if they get it
Yeah.
at 5, if they're small and need and get more money.
So they can apply for money based on that volunteer hour. Yeah. Yeah. Let me say, these are, I don't know about right now because I believe this is part of the 2013 addendum. But once the cultural plan is passed and the slate is wiped cleaner, there's still probably going to be some smudges here and there. we can look at how we calculate these numbers if it's important to the committee.
No, I just need a clarification.
Sure. So the proposal narrative, which is on your third page, we added a couple questions and we removed a couple questions. Or consolidated, but the biggest thing we did was we reorganized them based on the cultural plan. But the vast majority of these questions are the same. They might just be rewritten in my attempt at a soft skills approach. But it's sort of trying to see, like, how are you serving the underserved? How are you making Wichita a cultural hub? And then how are you creating new art or giving, paid professional opportunities in the city?
Just admit that objective numbering is,
Confusing?
well, 1.1 and 3.3 and 4.1.
So those are how they are listed in the plan.
Oh.
I can make that clear.
Oh, okay.
So it's like
It seems
goal.
like objective 1,
Yeah,
objective 2,
no.
objective 3.
Yeah.
They're related directly to
the-
what they are in the
In the
plan.
plan. Okay,
Yeah.
so we should, yes, that would be.
We could make that reference point.
Can make that
earlier.
much
And I
clearer.
don't, we can also hopefully by the time this is out, we'll be able to like hyperlink it to the plan to showcase like,
Oh,
This is a
that would
priority
make
of the
sense if it
city,
was
how-
blue,
Yeah.
You know, or
Yeah.
whatever, so that you knew that it was a.
This was a draft attempt at connecting it to the work that we're doing.
but it's also
I think
delicate.
I think it makes sense to have that connection for sure.
And it's also trying to strategize us into getting the information we need from the organizations in their contract without making them do stuff that they have no capacity to do. So we want to be able to track zip codes. Some of them won't be able to, but doesn't make them a failure. It just recognizes that that's a metric that we want to start gathering so that we can work towards seeing the increase because that's one of our goals. But specifically, like, how are you tracking underserved residents? A ticketed organization is going to struggle with that versus someone with gate admissions might be able to track that a little bit easier. So
In the attendance data, are we just asking for that for what time period? Is it for-
Their most recently completed fiscal year.
Okay. And that is all the data in this application, is that?
Yes. Well, unless there's a question that says over the past 3 years,
Right. Okay.
And that, again, that attendance data one will be the Excel sheet box. I just didn't draw it.
Okay, so they'll see. what-
Yeah.
Okay.
we did include under attendance data memberships and subscribers and season tickets. That's new this year.
That would be new this year. Yep.
To pull out the single user versus the like repeat user, which is purely just for us to start gauging metrics. Again, not a measurement of success or failure, but just so we really know the impact this sector is having.
Some organizations try to do that already. It was even more confusing as looking at it.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say, like, use the theater Wichita would do that. It would be, was anyone there, we always have questions on why the numbers were always not necessarily off, but it felt weird. We didn't have a location for memberships or season tickets on the individual one. Okay, I like that.
and then rental attendance is always kind of a tricky one because that I would say like non-mission programming that might happen, but it's a huge economic part of the organization. We want to be able to track that somehow to make sure they're not putting like, well, we had 500 people come to this wedding. Well, that's not necessarily admissions, but it's still interesting to know. So that's where that information pulls out and is obviously not applicable to organizations that don't own facilities or operate facilities. Which is why we try to say some of these may not apply to your org, and that's okay.
Thank you. The new questions are under objective 3.3, question 3, which says, I'm sorry, not question 3, question 4. How has your organization participated or been recognized in statewide, regional, or national arts and cultural programs or initiatives? If so, please describe them. That's basically directly from the plan. And then under objective 4.1, question 2, has your organization provided paid professional opportunities for artists to present their artwork or artistry? If so, how many artists? And briefly describe the opportunities. I'll edit that a little bit. Question 3, the final added question, has your organization brought artists or creative talent to Wichita in the past year? If so, please describe those programs. It's just about making sure that we are a hub, a cultural hub. Nadine is not here, so I don't have to defend changing the word youth to educational programming. She's gonna come for me. And then toward the end of it, I asked them to give me a ranking of when they'd like their Q&A session to be, because that's always a big pain in the butt, scheduling it. It gives me a good start. Because we have our June meeting before this potentially would go live, we don't necessarily have to approve it today, but if there are any major changes that anybody sees before I start recreating this in Submittable, it would be good to know.
Knowing how this committee works at times would encourage kind of proof of this. We're all okay with it right now, so we're not delaying the start of our program.
Sure.
So I just have one question before I'm going to do a motion on that. You mentioned really briefly that there was something that you had to add to it that you might have just forgotten. It was like a little phrase in here as we started talking. Did I remember that right?
There was an edit on the timeline that I needed to make. I don't remember, Jim, what you're referencing. Of course, as soon as I listen to the video, I'll go, dang it.
Well, on the objectives, I think we're gonna somehow call out that the objectives are.
Right. I'll alter the. I will.
Yeah, so I'd be willing to move based upon any of that, those changes that were on the recording that.
Sure.
Make sure that that's included on that.
Absolutely.
All in favor?
Thank you all.
It's exciting meeting.
And on time, look at that.
We're not up the room yet. So.
No.
One more, maybe just clerical. It's a good announcement. The Arts Council has generously offered to pay for lunch for this committee in the future. So, surprise, we didn't forget that for today, obviously.
Sorry.
But Jesse is likely going to be reaching out to you for any dietary restrictions or potential food requests in the future. We are frequent flyers at Jason's Deli because that's just our easiest.
I have to sit in
Contractual.
my boyfriend's restaurant at Solly and Jude downtown.
Oh, I
They
didn't.
do catering. Shameless plug.
Good to know.
Oh, it's good.
And sandwiches, right?
It's sandwiches, and they do sandwiches and tater tots.
Where-
Hot and cold sandwiches.
Where is it?
It's right by the arena.
It's right across from the
Oh.
Chest Arena. It's on
Okay.
Waterman and.
Emporia?
Mhm.
Noted.
We could try it.
Literally noted.
Right across from where?
In Chest Arena.
You might know the work release office across the street from it. You might be familiar with that one.
Oh,
All right, thank you, committee. We'll get you more information about the NEA grant funded. I will say it's not public information yet, so we're not airing it. And obviously, until we know what we're going to be going after, we don't want to get the community too excited when we don't know what it's going to be yet. So May 14th, please set the date to join us at City Council. We'll send out information about that, but would love to stack the council chambers with art supporters.
The Arts Council mixer at Mark Arts, what is that?
Want to talk about?
So Arts Mixer is a monthly gathering of arts leaders throughout the area and the general public. And we meet at a different location every month. It's just a very informal get together, chat with folks, make connections, see what everybody's up to, maybe learn a little bit about the location we're at. We've been at Mark Arts before, but this will be a nice return. Next month, we're at the historic Dunbar Theater. So that might be an interesting location to learn about. But it's a
open
month.
to the public.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's just a
absolutely.
networking event and like
Yeah.
kind of what I call the excuse to get to the place.
First time I noticed it was this one.
Mhm. So last month we did KMUW, and yeah, we've been to a lot of interesting places, and we'll continue. The one I'm most excited about in October, we're hoping to do Chester I. Lewis Park, sort of be in the lobby of the osteopathic school, and sort of spill into the park and celebrate the park. So, yeah.
Thank you.